Okay, good evening, everyone. I call this regular meeting to order at 6:31 PM. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Lotz. All right, thank you, Commissioner Lotz. Adrian, please call the roll.
Commissioner Shea, Commissioner Lotz,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Present.
Vice Chair Barantes, Chair Duong.
Present. Thank you. Now we're moving on to the approval of agenda order. Are there any objections to the agenda order today? If there is none, I will state, hearing none, the agenda order is approved. Okay, so the agenda order is approved. Now we will have a few announcements by Community Services Manager Matthew Morales-Stevens.
Tonight's meeting is live streamed on Cable Channel 3 and our online platforms. If you wish to address the Community Services Commission during tonight's meeting, we request that you please complete a speaker's card and hand it to the clerk, Adrian Franquez. When speaking, please state your name for the record. If you wish to be added to the distribution list to receive Community Services Commission agendas, please email your request to cscommission@sgch.org.
Okay. Moving on to public comments. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the Community Services Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Community Services Commission cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda. Adrian, do we have any public comments for tonight's meeting?
We do not.
Okay. Action items. The first thing we'll do is approve minutes. The minutes are a record of the official actions taken at the Community Services Commission meeting on June 3rd, 2024. Matthew, do we have any public comments on the action item?
We do not.
Okay, the time for public comment on this item is now closed. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the Community Services Commission regular meeting on Monday, June 3rd, 2024?
Yep. I make a motion to approve.
Is there?
Second the motion.
Okay, great.
I'll take the roll.
Mhm.
Commissioner Shea is absent. Commissioner Lotz,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barantes is absent. Chair Duong.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 3 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstentions, and 2 absent.
We are now on Section 4, discussion items. The Community Services Department will present their communications plan. They will present a report on this, and that includes the addition of SMS notifications, which reminds me, what does SMS stands for?
Short messaging service.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, so text messaging is the way I
That's right. It is.
describe it. Okay, so go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you. You threw me off with the what does the acronym actually mean, but I knew it meant text messages, but that's as far as my knowledge went. So thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. So the communications plan that is drafted is something that we created very recently. So up until this point, the Community Services Department has been operating on a case-by-case basis. We have a kind of standard practice that we typically use, but as we get new employees, it is difficult to disseminate that information unless it's written down. So I think given the number of times that we've had some inconsistent messaging and ways that maybe people would be liking to receive information but are maybe not getting it in the way that they is either most effective or ways that is most readily available to them. We've outlined this. We've also had a meeting with Chair Dong, so thank you for providing the feedback in that meeting as well. And so we're bringing it to the commission tonight to see if there's ways that you as residents or people that you have spoken with have provided feedback as to how we can improve as a department or different technologies that we can implement that maybe we haven't thought of. For example, we are using Constant Contact to begin implementing the SMS notifications or text messages, but Commissioner Dong or Chair Dong provided an alternative to Constant Contact. So those are the things that we're really wanting to hear. We're not necessarily tied to anything. There are certain things that as a department or as the city we have to do, or there's things that maybe we right now may not have the capacity to implement, but we can certainly add it to the docket of things to begin implementing. So we'll run through kind of what the current expectations of staff are across the board, and then we'll roll into some of the things that the department will be implementing or is in the process of implementing. So cancellation. So this is obviously the number one item where people want the most readily accessible information, especially if they're making special accommodations in their schedule. They don't want to be left, showing up to a class and then surprise, there's a note on the door, right? So those are the things that we're really trying to make concrete, and that way when they sign up for something, they know where they can look for the information. So the recommendation was to kind of pick two and move forward, which I loved. So the ones would be email and putting something on the actual web page. So that way if they signed up for an aquatics class, they can reference the aquatics web page and then realize, oh yes, it was canceled. Or if they registered for something, it will be easy for us to send an email. If it's something like RecSwim where we don't have a readily accessible database, we can put something on social media, so that would be the alternative to the email system. So of those sections, we would have notifications sent out 5 days prior. Of course, if more notice is provided to us, then we would send it out earlier. Or if it's something like a pool pump breaking down that's completely out of our control and happens the day before, then sure, we'll send that out as the information is made available. Hopefully that doesn't happen this summer, but it could. It has in the past, so I'm not trying to jinx anything. With that said, it will differ just based on whether or not we have prior registration or it's a drop-in program. The new notification programs that we've implemented over the last couple years would be the bi-monthly newsletter, which is done through Constant Contact. Adrian actually is the one that puts it together each month. She gathers all of the information that the program staff are working on, so any special events or youth programs, senior programs, and adds it in there. And then she prioritizes, how it shows up based off of kind of what's the most pertinent. For example, the last one highlighted July 3rd, obviously, because it's coming up quickly and it's one of the biggest events that the city hosts. So we really wanted to put that at the forefront. The other item is the City Beat. That is not unique to our department. It is a citywide newsletter and is published by the Public Information Office. We try to be as selective as possible with regards to what is going in there. So if it's something that's of importance to the general public, that's what's going to make it into that newsletter. If it's something that's hyper specific, it may not make it into that one. It may stay with our community services newsletter. Social media, that's another area where I'm sure all of you as residents have seen the progression over the years, especially with Clara and Jessica. Clara is no longer with us, but she's the one that was kind of the catalyst to transitioning our social media platforms and increasing engagement with the public. And so anything that we have, especially with special events, gets packaged over to the Public Information Office, so any photos, any nitty-gritty details, and then they are the ones that produce the items that you see up on the social media. And then if it is a program site, so program specific, there'll also be notifications or flyers at the site. And then emails typically get sent out to the principals. So the principals will leave it to their discretion whether or not it goes onto Parent Square, but 9 times out of 10, if not more, it makes it actually onto Parent Square because they realize that it's of community benefit or of general benefit to their students as well. Any questions so far?
Just one comment, and I think I brought this up in our conversation earlier too. Instead of just cancellations, can we just also say that for any updates to programs, right? It should be sent out 5 days in advance. And maybe just before we move on, I just maybe want to preface it by saying that this community service department, they do a lot behind the scenes, including a lot of events that happen during the weekend. And that includes all the swim programs, any special sort of one-off events that's happening at the Mission Playhouse. There are employees that will work, the lifeguards, the ushers, but in terms of the admin staff, they're not necessarily in the office on the weekends, and it would be a burden for them to be very responsive during the weekend. So the idea is that as we're talking through this, let's find a way so that it's easier for staff to be able to provide updates to the public or information about cancellations where it's not too onerous for them because they're not necessarily working on the weekend. So whatever we can do to make it much more efficient, make it a lot more accurate in terms of reporting to the public what's actually happening and what's changing. And also in terms of just making it possible for staff to be able to work the hours that they currently have, as well as managing all the different tasks they currently have on an ongoing basis that's not related to the one-off events.
I have a question because this is great that trying to put in automations in place. Is there like a triage communication system in any case, for example, something urgent about a cancellation happens 2 hours before and it's a weekend?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
is that-
that is typically me. So in the case that something urgent happens, typically that just gets funneled through me, and then I'll push that out. As the supervisors are with the city a little longer, they'll be of more assistance, but typically I'm the one that has my phone on me, can more rapidly respond to those situations where the expectation isn't there for some of the program staff or admin team to be on call at any given moment. And then one of the items actually that was brought up in the meeting for the cancellations and updates was to look into automated voice messages or phone calls, which I really loved because some people may find that that's more accessible. I know very little about it as far as implementation. I know how, on the receiving end, right? I think we all receive them. But as far as implementation, we'll still need to look into that. But I did think it was a great add-on.
And I forgot to mention too that the city that's currently using automatic or automated voice messages is not a city in California that I'm aware of, but it's in the city of Newark, New Jersey. So if you have any feelers out there, someone in that space in New Jersey, maybe you can reach out to their PIO office and see how they set it up.
Thank you. So special event notification, you can see we really go all out for special events once we have all of the information. So biweekly newsletter, City Beat, the flyer. So we typically print 500. We used to do a combination of street banners and then thousands of flyers. We actually used to bundle them, drop them off at schools, do street banners, which are well over $1,000 between design and printing. But when COVID hit, we have cut down substantially on printing costs and haven't really seen a drastic decrease or any decrease at all as far as attendance for those special events. If anything, they just continue to increase. The best example is like Cinco de Mayo and Dia de los Muertos. Those aren't things that we have been printing flyers for. Those are not things that we've been doing street banners for, and the attendance keeps growing for those. But I think that's due in large part to the social media presence that's kind of shifted those efforts. In certain circumstances, we'll pay a little bit of money. For example, for the Summer in San Gabriel series, we set $500 aside for social media boosts. So that goes in addition to just the regular posting that the Public Information Office does. And I, again, am not an expert on boosting. I did a presentation on behalf of the PIO, which I think Adrian provided to you. So any specific details, I'm happy to go back and ask those. I just don't have those readily available for you. And then the forms of communication that have been added are constant contact, and we just provided a quick rundown of some stats that constant contact provided to us. So over the last 90 days, there's been a 71% open rate and then a 5% click rate. So not a huge click rate, but pretty solid open rate. The average is typically, as my understanding, is 20 to 30%. It breaks it down by industry. I just haven't been able to pull that information yet. So hopefully we'll be able to compare that more apples to apples when people are receiving more government-tailored information.
What is constant is that pushing out SMS?
Oh, sure. So that's the one that's producing all of our emails.
Emails. Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's actually really good. And 70%. That's nice. And then for the context of the link, is that usually something that brings you to the city webpage, or is it oftentimes just not even needed to click into?
Yeah, so it really
See.
depends. Adrian does a really great job of trying to get the key details in a very short little couple sentences or bullet points, so that way you don't have to click. But there will be times, for example, July 3rd event, where you have to click the link in order to get the tickets. So that's where the clicking portion would come in handy, or if they want to find out more information. But she always links that specific item back to our webpage to find out, the full breadth of information.
Actually, at least based on industry standards, usually click rates are 1 to 3%. So this is actually pretty good.
Yeah. And that's great. And I will say, Adrian does a really good job of trying to make it as exciting as possible to the reader, so it's not just plain text on a page. So I think that's what sets us apart from other agencies as well, is that they're not just getting bored with the information that's on there. The interesting information, which I would have sworn up and down that it was the opposite, is that 92% of the emails were opened on a desktop versus a mobile phone, which is at 6%. So that kind of changed the way that we were looking at our notifications and how it appears, because we always click on them, click on how it looks on your phone, and that's what's most important. But it was interesting to see that a large portion actually was just logging onto their desktop. So,
I think because I was able to see the report, and that was pretty awesome that Adrian was able to send that. It's because of the demographics too. It's a little bit older.
sure.
But, I guess that's maybe a good learning for us a couple of months, because eventually we'd have to look into how do we drive more into mobile
Mhm.
versus desktop, right? And I guess it depends on our objective as well of where we want participation to be at. But right now, this totally makes sense because given the demographics.
So the Passport online system, for those of you that may not be familiar, we do offer passports Monday through Friday at our office by appointment only. And so rather than going back and forth via email with the customer a bunch of times between cancellations or rescheduling or trying to find out the information on what to bring, Adrian again came up with the system. Another local city agency uses it for their scheduling system for passports. And once they schedule the appointment, it emails them all of the information that they need, so essentially a checklist of what to bring to the office. And then they can log on and reschedule if they need to without having to call into the office. We always love chatting with people, but if we can save everyone some time and staff can allocate their resources elsewhere, and the customer, hopefully, for those of the customers that don't like to pick up the phone, they never have to talk to us until they actually see us in person. So hopefully it's a win-win. It has seen, it's reduced our cancellations and no-shows substantially, and people come more prepared to their appointments, thereby not wasting that time slot as well.
A quick question. When did we start doing the passports? Has it been a while?
7 or 8 years ago, I believe. Oh, that far?
Wow.
back? Okay, I was really far.
Do we have like a monthly average of how many people come in to sign?
It depends during the year. It does fluctuate. Around the summer, it's around 100 a month. And then in the off season, it's more 70 to 90.
Good. That's pretty awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for providing that information, Adrian. And I'm glad she clarified that it was around '05. I did not realize it was that far. So the increase of city website, so we're really making a conscious effort to put as much information up there as possible, so that way people aren't trying to, make multiple clicks. And we try to reduce the number of clicks as much as possible. Sure, if you've clicked through the website, you've realized it takes a ton of clicks to even get to our webpage, but once they get to our webpage, our department webpage, we try to make it as streamlined as possible. And then increase social media, as we've mentioned, and then the SMS testing pilot programs have begun. So we're rolling it out in 2 phases. We may add on more phases as we go along. As I mentioned, I am not an expert in this. I purchased the add-on to our email Constant Contact to do the text messages and spent hours trying to figure it out. And Adrian figured it out in a much quicker timeline. So I'm very appreciative for all of her hard work. And we'll get into kind of the specifics of what that looks like. But the idea is the end goal would be program specific, right? So I apologize for using aquatics, but that's just the one that comes to mind. If a class is canceled because staff are out sick or because there's an issue with the pool, we can send a quick text message, especially since some of those class times are outside of business hours or outside of times when you would typically be reading emails or on your phone. The text message would be sent directly to them.
That's huge. Yeah.
Great.
Good on you. And sounds like we need snaps for Adrian. Go,
Yes.
Adrian.
And I will say that is phase 2, is so sending direct to participants in programs. And the reason being is because there is a very long waiver that needs to be signed. It's en route for the city attorney to review before we add it to our registration software. So if you register for a class right now, you have to agree to a waiver, which is essentially a liability waiver. So at that same time, you would also click a box to agree to all of the terms and conditions to receive text messages. So in the state of California, you have to have expressed liability, or maybe it's further than California. I apologize. I can only speak to that knowledge. You have to have expressed knowledge versus implied, which is what we use for emails. So we do have to go through that process. So that won't start until the fall, where we can add that on, since we've already done registration for the majority of our summer classes and programs. But phase 1 is 4 different subsections, and they are actually on the sheet that Adrian just passed out. And so it is Discover San Gabriel and registration, Smith Park pool updates, which is aquatics, and then special event updates. It was sent out in our July newsletter on Friday, and you could click to register. So again, it's additional steps, but until we can auto-enroll program-specific items, it will still be good for those who have general, just want general information. For example, if Rec Swim is canceled and they're on the aquatics list, they will get that information as soon as we have it available. If they want to know when Discover San Gabriel will make it to their mailbox, they'll sign up for that specific list. And so we did that methodically in the fact that if you unsubscribe from one, again, this is Constant Contact, maybe others have it a different way. You get unsubscribed for SMS through all of the lists that you have signed up for. We're still working out to see if there's a way around that. But as of now, that's the information that we have. And the downside to pushing out too much information. So if I threw everyone onto one list and said, you're all going to get information about everything and you may not care about it, then we'll start seeing that unsubscription or unsubscribe rate increase. So that's what we're trying to avoid by going this route. Adrian, do you have information on the number of people that subscribed by chance for those 4? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So on the list that I distributed for Discover SGs, there were 9 total contacts, 6 people with emails, 3 that included their phone number for text messaging. For Smith Park Pool, there were 32 total contacts, 25 that provided their email, and 7 with their phone number. Special event updates, there were 17 total, 12 with their email, and 5 included their phone number. We did include those same links onto our main website, like our main department website, as well as the aquatics website, to hopefully encourage more subscriptions. And we'll also provide a QR code at the pool.
Quick question, because I understand that there has to be the, what did you say earlier about, is it
Expressed consent.
express consent? I just haven't read express consent, but does it specifically say just the program that they sign up for, or is it for mostly every communication? At least that we send out. So for example, if I'm just signing up for a passport, renewing my passport, if we have the option to like, hey, we actually have this, would you like to sign up? So in any case, so I'm not sure if now if someone opts out of aquatics, for example, it's only aquatics that they signed out of, or does that take them out of all the other communications as well?
So if I'm understanding correctly, if they are signing up for one item and then they just decide that they want to unsubscribe, it would pull them from that list. But if they're also on other lists, as of now, it would just unsubscribe them from all of the lists that they've signed up for. The expressed consent, though, if they, let's say, registered for one class, that's going to, the way it's written is to receive any messages from the city of San Gabriel, meaning that I can then dump them into a broader list if needed. And then if it's program specific, obviously they'll know to expect that. And then if we end up tying it in with the newsletter, for example, to where when the newsletter goes out, they get a notification that like, hey, check out our newsletter, and then it brings the email newsletter up. It's kind of a twofold way for them to find out the information. But those are the things that we'll need to kind of play around with to figure out what the community best responds to as well.
I think it's very helpful, and just based on what you were saying, I think that's helpful that you're trying to pull it from other lists as well, as long as, of course, they have opted in. But that's perfect because that'll be growing the list. Thanks.
From my experience, it's a blanket statement, so you have to opt in. If you do, you opt into all the messaging. Obviously, we don't want to inundate people, because if they do sign out, as Matthew was saying, once they sign out from one list, even if it's just for the Jefferson program or a Smith Park pool, they will opt out of all city communications on SMS. So I guess we're trying to figure out sort of how to separate the list so that they're not opting out of everything. Okay, do you want to continue, or do you have any more
Yeah,
points?
just a few final items. So there's two examples on the very last page. One is on the right-hand side is the landing page. And we're learning all of this new technology or new terminology as we go along, like landing page. So that's where when you click one of the little icons that Adrian's created to sign up for, let's say, the aquatics link or the aquatics text messages, it will bring you to the Smith Park Pool Updates landing page, and that's where you'll enter in your information and then click sign up, and then you'll be good to go moving forward. To the left is what happens when you actually click submit. So you'll get that initial message saying reply yes. So there's still one more step, unfortunately, to really confirm that you want to receive those. And then it then confirms that you're enrolled, and then the option to stop should you not want to receive any additional messages. So you can see that the individual clicked stop, and then the message that then gets bounced back to them. But other than that, we are happy to answer any questions or concerns or feedback that you have to make this more accessible to the public.
Do you have a timeline as to when the SMS might be rolled out? I know we've already sent out the initial email last Friday, and there are a couple of signups. Are you going to push it even further, boost this message, or what are the thoughts?
Did you want to take that one?
Well, for the aquatics, I think we'll wait. It'll be on, if there's a cancellation, we'll send one there, or
And
like
so
a
the-
need to basis. And then maybe once the texts start going out, then people will hear that they've received texts and they might want to join the list as well.
And we'll really try to utilize the QR code at the pool, another one of Adrian's great ideas, because they're already there. They're waiting for their kids, so they may as well just scan it and sign up while they're there. That's probably one of the few amount of free time that they'll have while they're in the water. So we'll also push it out through City Beat and the other forms that we're already using, and hope that people are understanding kind of the importance to click on it and sign up. So I think that will be the hardest thing is trying to get them to understand and phrase it in a way that is accessible to the general public. Obviously, we wouldn't be using SMS. We're going to be using something like text messages or instant notifications or something like that. That will be better received by the public.
And just like with any communication in our city of San Gabriel, we have so many wonderful languages. If there's a way we could also boost it in terms of Chinese or Spanish, obviously, and you know, we're doing that in English now with the email. I think it was just in English, right?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe we can translate that as well. And also, the nice thing about being on SMS is that you can just copy and paste in Google Translate,
That's true.
and then you know exactly what that SMS message is about, right? You don't actually have to type it in. So that's sort of in terms of reaching all members of our demographic, you know, making sure that the language needs are addressed as well. But I would love to hear from the commissioners about how they receive updates. There are 5 different ways in which communication methods can be used to notify the public of cancellations or updates. What do you think is a good strategy or approach that's sustainable, efficient going forward? Do you believe that we should choose just the 2 of the 5 bullet points that are listed here, or should we kind of tackle more of those methods? Or fewer?
For me, text is like the only thing that actually comes to my mind. Like I just want it front and center, and so I think the fact that we're even thinking of 2, the webpage, of course, I mean, should be updated as sort of like a centralized space. But to me, I think that those 2 are plenty.
We're talking about cancellations, right?
Cancellations and updates. So for instance, if there's a city event, like the marathon, for instance, last year there was some bad weather on the day that the turkey trot was supposed to happen, so they moved it from a Saturday to a Sunday. So how would you get that message across? Again, it's on the weekend, staffing is very light, right? So how would you want to receive it, as a member of the public, how would you want to receive information about that?
For me, I'd rather receive it from all possible, because there'd be times I missed my text message, but I'm looking at my email. So, and a cancellation is huge. It can imagine you prepared for it, your mindset is already in there, and then you got there and it is canceled. There's nothing more frustrating than that, to experience that, than to just receive 5 different messages from different platforms, right? So I would rather be sure that I send it to them than be frustrated to go there that I wasn't informed. So that's just my take on it.
You know, obviously we want to be able to provide as much transparency as possible to the public, but just to play devil's advocate, you know, there is somebody who has to sit behind the screen to push that message forward. So, you know, would you say that we would need all 5 for every type of cancellation or update, or should we be more selective?
And the only reason why I'm suggesting that, because I think there is an automated way to do it for all. If there isn't an app, there are certain applications called, I will share it with you afterwards. Because there are some automations where they actually work within apps, which will make your life easier. So for example, it's automated. You send an email from anywhere, like your email, and then you send it to an email address, and then it connects to all of the other apps that you're using. So now you're doing it for all, making it easier for you to do it. And it only takes 1 message.
Okay, that's
So now, even if it's just an automated, for example, like let's say there's a cancellation, you can even create an automated message for a cancellation. So now it automatically emails it to that app, and then it spreads it out. So now that triaging system makes it so much easier. So, and then, of course, you don't have to be there going to each.
Right.
Right, so. Once I find out, I'm going to email it to you because I know there's a couple that I've used before.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that would be wonderful if you want to follow up with the staff about that. Just another point too is that this communication strategy is just for the Community Services Department. So the Community Development Department separately runs other programs like the Farmers Market, which who knows if it's coming back. But they also, operate the Lunar Festival, Dumpling and Beer Festival. So if we're successful in creating this plan, hopefully that it would be adopted more widely by the city. So there isn't any confusion from the public about why messaging is done a certain way for certain programs and not for other programs within the same small city. Because I feel like most people wouldn't know that there's a separation in terms of which staff is devoted to which events.
That's right. And I think this is one of the comments that I had last time, the last meeting, right, was more collaboration between groups because, again, as a general public, it just comes from City of San Gabriel. It doesn't matter where it came from, right? So, and if we're sharing that, maybe they have other solutions as well that we don't know. So.
Wonderful. Would you like any further feedback from the commissioners? Anything else that we can address further?
Sure. Just as we're rolling it out, feel free to send me an email, text message, phone call, whatever, as it comes to mind. Usually that more instant feedback allows us to more quickly pivot on these items. So anything that you have, feel free to send it our way.
Okay, wonderful. So we are, unless there are any further comments, we're just going to move on to the next item on the agenda. If I can find the agenda. There we go. So in terms of additional events and program updates, there's a major event that's happening this week, something called the Drone Show, which we have never done before. I think San Gabriel Valley has never hosted a drone show before, so there's a lot of excitement around this. I had the experience of, as soon as the staff sent out an email to register, I was able to register, and it was a very smooth process. Hopefully, all members of the public were able to also register for free for this event. In terms of communication and working with other departments, what I've heard from some members is that potentially the police department is now telling people that even if you've registered, as long as they've hit capacity, they might not let you into the event. Can you clarify that?
Sure. Yeah, so if you've registered, you will 100% be allowed into the event. So we are not registering above and beyond the capacity. If anything, we're being a bit more conservative. So that way we don't run into the point where people are being turned away that have registration. So that I'll certainly follow up with PD to ensure that that is not the message that's being conveyed. But as of now, so going off of your point, we have 3,772 tickets. That was as of noon this afternoon sold. The initial capacity was somewhere, this is kind of not including some of the booths and stuff that we've added, was around like 16,000. So I don't think that that's really a realistic capacity for that space given the flow of people moving around and lines that start on a food truck or things like that that just naturally happen at a festival type atmosphere. So we are estimating at a cap off of 6,000. And then as the event starts funneling people in, then we'll be in close contact with the fire chief to see how many day of registrations we can actually let in. But I don't foresee us having, at least for this year, having to really turn anyone away.
I'd like to comment as well that the registration process was very easy.
Okay, good.
It was quick and easy.
Are, if someone has registered for, say, 10 tickets, then they're not all together when they're coming, because that tends to happen with big groups, are they allowed to come and sort of, some members of that party at different times, or how does that work with the new ticketing system?
Yeah, they certainly can. What will happen is their ticket gets scanned. So the scanning is controlled through the system. So the system will determine whether or not they've reached capacity. So once it's scanned a certain number of times, then it's done. So similar to like any concert or anything that you would go to. That's the upside of using a system that was intended for the Playhouse, is that it's meant for people who, it's not a typical check-in system that you would use for something else like a class.
Okay. And there's a barcode where you're scanning it in and you don't have a clipboard writing down.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Correct. Yes.
Sorry, one additional comment on that, because I too registered for my family to come. So the person who registered will have to have, if it's 10 people, each person would have to have their individual ticket to be scanned, because with the way it worked is that person who registered would have all of those 10 barcode or QR codes on their phone. So each person would need to have their ticket to be able to get in.
So they would have to forward it to whoever's in charge
Right,
of the
or
subgroups.
it was a printable option as well, so you could print them and they could have a physical ticket if you wanted it as well.
Great. Well, I think, 3,772 tickets is a great start. Given what we spent on this program, it'd be nice to see that number go up to 6,000, because we're looking at, it was about 60,000, I think, so it's about $6 per person that we're spending. If we get to 6,000 or 12, if we stay at 3,000. Because, again, this is a one-off event, so it's not a recurring program. We're not further investing in the city. Obviously, we're bringing the city together with an event like this, but it would be great, maybe with communication strategy to sort of get the word out a lot more. To, make sure the event is well attended, and that they, are able to get in quickly, able to enjoy all the food trucks that have come out, because we want to support local vendors as well, and any other community groups that might be there on that day. Okay, any questions about events or program updates from the other commissioners? Okay. So we are moving on to item C, which is the discussion of the 2024 annual work plan. This is something we talked about last time for your first meeting. We assigned roles at that point. In terms of assigning roles, it's really, what is your interest? Where do you think you can leverage your knowledge and experience to help the Community Services Department carry out their mission of providing programming for the city? Are there any changes or any updates you'd like to provide with regards to the work plan?
None on my end, but I do remember signing up for a couple that I'm interested, so I'm just anxious for it to start. And again, as you mentioned earlier, email would be easy so that we can keep going. Feel free. So if there has to be any involvement that I can jump in, just please let me know.
I also just realized, Adrian, that I did forget to solicit public comments on the events and program updates. Should I go back to that first?
It would be best to go back
Okay.
just to formalize it.
Okay, so do we have any public comments on the previous item, which is on events and program updates?
There are no public comments.
Okay, so the time for public comment on that item is now closed. Okay, so now moving to the work plan. Would staff, find that it's more useful for us to reach out by email on the items that we've expressed interest to sort of work on?
Yeah, email is definitely best. If it's something urgent, feel free to text me though.
I think there was one area where we talked about communications. Innovative resources, number 4, and that's definitely the SMS, the communication strategy will fall under that. Being able to reach different audiences with the platform that we have, which is now the SMS technology through Constant Contact or whatever program you decide to replace that with. And I believe the RFP for the registration system has been approved by the city council and mayor, so we're on track in terms of releasing the RFP at some point.
Yes. So it should be this month. We should be on track, unless for some reason something gets thrown, like our printer completely dies, then I'll have to prioritize that. But otherwise, we should be on track.
Okay. Now, do you need us to review the RFP before it goes out, or is that just something that's under the purview of city council?
Yeah. So since City Council already approved the budget, we typically wouldn't send any of those details out. We would bring it back to council for the approval of the contract at that time. But if there's anything that the commission has that you know of in another city or even a private entity that you register through them utilizing. Sorry, that was not a complete sentence. I apologize. But if there's a third party that you do register either yourself or your children or a sibling for, and you loved it, those are the things that we want to hear. And if there's things that you absolutely hated, bring that to our attention too, so that way we can ask those questions throughout the interview process, or include it as a requirement when we release the RFP. Because what we don't want is to release the RFP and then get all of these submissions and then add in a requirement after the fact. That's when things start getting very messy and difficult to weed through the companies.
Does it make sense for us to look at sort of just high-level bullets of what the RFP will include?
Yeah, we can
Characteristics you
certainly
look-
send that over.
Include, okay. For, when do you anticipate releasing that?
Should be released by the end of the month.
The end of the month, okay. Well, I don't think that we have another meeting, though, before the end of the month, so is it something that we want to look at, or are we okay just?
No, I'd love to see it, just to, if there's an opportunity for me to throw in my 2 cents, I'd love to. But I'm pretty sure, I think by then, it's almost like final that we're proposing this specific supplier, right? Or no,
Yeah,
not?
so the release of the RFP will just to be to get proposals
Oh, okay.
in from all of these companies. So we've had very informal conversations just to see what is even available, because our system is much older than all of these new systems. So we needed to figure out, is it worth going out and spending the money on a new system, which obviously it is, and what can they provide, or the majority of companies provide that our system cannot. So those are the things that you'll see kind of listed out that would be looking for. For example, some of them actually send out text messages through the registration software versus having to have a separate system for that. So those are the types of things we'd be looking for.
So the RFP is basically, these are guidelines.
That's right.
So, and they would be ranking all of the proposals based on those guidelines that are established by the RFP.
Is it 3 weeks or so you're leaving it open, the RFP?
I don't have the timeline yet. If memory serves me correctly, we did a 3 to 4 week turnaround for the Discover St. Gabriel, so we would likely have the same turnaround.
Yeah.
And that would include the kind of Q&A section where there's a deadline for them to submit their questions, and then we'll
Yeah.
submit all of the responses back to them.
And that also gives the city an opportunity to issue an addendum if something were to come up, you know, in the next meeting that was revolutionary. They could always issue an addendum to everybody who's, you know, reaching out about that. So
With regards to the next meeting, actually, we will talk about that, but we are thinking of pushing the August meeting because City Council has canceled their August meeting as well for summer break. So we won't actually meet up again until September if we agree to push it to September. So the addendum might not be released until we meet in September.
Well, if that's the case, I think if the earliest that you can share RFP, that'll be great. And then, because I just want to be able to help. I have pretty good experience in terms of these kinds of systems, so might come in handy.
So if there's another commissioner that's interested in joining that process with Commissioner Rodriguez, we can certainly provide the information to two and make sure that it doesn't become a meeting. So just, I don't know if you want to discuss that now or just reach out later.
Sorry, I just want to mention that September 2nd, which is the first Monday, is Labor Day.
Labor Day.
That would have to be canceled or rescheduled for later in the month, the September meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, typically we would just cancel.
What does the City Council do? Do they push it to the following week?
So just a correction, the first meeting in August for city council is not being held because it's National Night Out. So they don't cancel because of the holiday, because of the summer break. They cancel the meeting because it's National Night Out, which is celebrated in the Mission District. The Labor Day conflict doesn't happen for city council because it's on Tuesdays, so it's not a conflict for city council.
Check the calendar online, and city council is canceled on the 3rd
Oh,
on September.
there you go. Sorry, misinformation.
So I'm okay if you would like to look over the RFP. Commissioner Lotz, are you interested as well?
That's okay. I trust Commissioner here.
Okay, all right. And I know we've got a couple of commissioners who are not present today, so if we want to, I don't know if we are allowed to, if the staff wants to suggest, just take 5 minutes, look at this RFP, see if anything jumps out at you, and someone else can volunteer, because I guess according to the Brown Act, we can't have more than 2 commissioners looking at this without it becoming a meeting. And if we are bouncing emails back and forth and becomes an email, it becomes a meeting that's not been announced. So that's the reason why we have to.
That means process-wise, once I get to look at it, I just have to email it to you directly. Okay, got it.
So it sounds like Commissioner Rodriguez, and then if you want to send an email out to Barantes and then we can figure out who wants to look at it, because I think there are lots of, our commissioners are great because they have such varied backgrounds, but they have very, I think, technology-focused backgrounds too, Commissioner Sheehy and Barantes, so it'd be great to get their inputs on communications plan, but, specifically on the RFP, if they have any ideas about who some of the vendors are or what we should be looking for, so that we're finding the right partner. Because once we, as you know, with large technology projects, as soon as you select someone, it's very hard to unwind, it's very expensive, and everyone's already bought into the process. So then to have to switch them out, it becomes very expensive and onerous.
So which means procedurally, if, for example, Commissioner Barantes or she wanted to look at it as well, do we have to meet or something? What's the process on that?
Sure. So if Commissioner or Vice Chair Barantes decided he also wanted to review the RFP, you two could meet together if you wanted to. You could meet independently.
Okay.
It would be up to you as to how the communication happens or doesn't happen. Since it's 2 or less, I guess you'd be meeting by yourself, but two commissioners can meet together and talk freely about any agenda item, as long as then you don't talk about that same agenda item to, for example, Commissioner Lotz.
That's right.
In a separate meeting, then have the same conversation.
So it has to be a minority of the commissioners. That makes sense. For scoring of the RFP, do you plan to be forthcoming with those who are submitting proposals of, we plan to score based on experience at 50% and price at 20% and your actual written proposal? Like, are you planning to lay that out?
I'll be honest and say that wasn't part of the plan. I do typically do these process very as objective as possible on our end, but I don't typically tell them up front as to what that process looks like.
That's fair. Well, just because sometimes it can be encouraging or discouraging to certain vendors from wanting to apply in the first place, and I can say that with experience on capital improvement side, not technology, but if you say that it's going to be 90% on the price, then maybe somebody who's an excellent service but knows that they are more expensive, they just may have no interest, and that may also help you on the front end just with weeding people out, right? So it's just a suggestion that in my experience, I've found it helpful from understanding, should I even look into something like this, working with the city,
Right.
because the score is based on something that I am not competitive in. Right.
I realized that I sort of, in terms of the work plan, I started from the very bottom of the list, only because we were talking about innovative resources. But we can go through methodically each of these sections. The first section was really, I think, based on the handout that we received today too, was about the Youth Ambassador Program, which staff presented us with a manual, a little bit, it's a volunteer handbook, I should say. That's provided to all volunteers within the city of San Gabriel. Are you looking for opinions about this or corrections, or
Sure.
how would you like us to engage on this?
Yeah, so I provided some of the updates to the actual application that were discussed at the prior meeting. I apologize if I missed anything. I was trying to really pick up on the comments. But there was discussion as far as could it go younger than 16? It is a fairly recent practice that volunteers must be 16 years of age and older to volunteer in the city on a regular basis. We have a process in place for volunteers where they come in, we make sure that they're a good fit, and then they fill out the volunteer orientation paperwork that you see in front of you. And that one is fairly dated. So that one has not been touched in several years. But it is what is used for the onboarding purposes of a volunteer. Prior to that, I apologize. Typically, they'll go through a TB test and live scan if they're over 18. If they're under 18, then we would ask that they're in good standing with school, so either a report card or a letter from a school counselor or teacher, and along with the TB test still. For the prior Youth Ambassador program that the HERE Commission led, we didn't formalize it as a volunteer program. It was as simple as them completing the application. They were interviewed and then joined the commission. There was no volunteer paperwork that was filled out in addition to that. So just as a note, so that way you have all of the options in front of you. It isn't technically a requirement that they complete those as of now, but if that's something that the commission would like to do, we can certainly add that on. The other item is just finalizing an interview date, and then the expected start date would be October 2nd, given that that September meeting would be canceled. And then at the top under eligibility, it's highlighted as well, is whether or not the commission wanted just San Gabriel residents or the San Gabriel residents and those that live in the unincorporated area, because most likely they attend our schools in SGUSD. And that was the last item.
So just one point of clarification. So are we canceling the September meeting and rescheduling it, or are we just canceling for the month?
So ultimately, it's up to the commission. And historically, we have just canceled and then picked up at the next regular meeting. But if there's
October.
something if there's something urgent that the commission wanted to meet on in September, we would schedule a special meeting.
Do we have any preferences in terms of when we should have the meeting in September or October? My thought was that we would cancel the August meeting because of summer break. But it seems like the only reason why the commission or the council canceled is because of the National Night Out. So,
Which is on a different night than we are scheduled, correct?
Correct.
The National Night Out is it on a Tuesday this year?
Correct.
I suppose, I mean, one off for a summer break makes sense. 2 in a row, I'm not gonna shoot it down either. I don't know.
I just feel like consecutive missed meetings is huge. So, I mean, I'm flexible. If you guys are, I can meet. Just if whatever's convenient for everyone. But I'd rather find a meeting time than because 2 meetings are way too far.
And I should also note, you could leave the September meeting alone as in canceled and then do a special meeting for the interviews, because with all of you present in one room, we would need to do a special meeting and notice it properly. So the interviews would be your September meeting.
what do we think?
So in that case, the August one would be like our summer break, and then the September one would just be repurposed.
Correct.
I think that makes,
That lines up for me.
yeah. So the youth program would start in October after we've had a chance to interview them in this special meeting, which I guess would happen after September 6th on Friday, because that's the submission deadline for this.
Yeah.
I think the question you had to was sort of the pool of candidates When we talked about it last time, we wanted to include anyone who is going to a San Gabriel school,
Okay.
regardless of where they live. We want the kind of pool of candidates to be as wide as possible. That would make sense. While also, you know, noting the importance of having someone who's engaged with the community, either living in San Gabriel or going to a school in San Gabriel. So it can't just be
Okay.
open to Pasadena students, for instance. That would make sense.
Got it. And then are we fine with the age group of 16 to 19?
So 16 would
Be-
cover juniors in high school,
Mhm.
juniors and seniors in high school, and I would be okay with that.
Sounds good.
Wait, I think I mentioned this before the meeting started. This would have to be the volunteer program handbook. Says 15 is the limit, so we would just need to maybe change that. Section 6.12.
Sure.
C does not encourage the use of volunteers who are under 15 years of age, just to make it consistent with the new policy, which amend that to 16. Also, to reiterate, we do not compensate any volunteers, and that extends to mileage reimbursements.
Mhm.
So that's something that would need to be crossed out. And that would be section 5.4, expenses. So if you're kind of creating a volunteer program handbook just for the purposes of our commission, then just take out those sections, I guess. Anything else with regards to that? Any other questions?
Sure. So is the consensus that the commission wants to run it more as a volunteer program with that packet, or a more, I guess, simplified version where they would simply be interviewed and then appointed as the commission with no additional paperwork?
Does it present any benefit to the young one to be considered a volunteer?
Either way, we would write them a letter with service hours provided, because they are acting in a volunteer capacity. So to the youth, it really doesn't provide any additional pluses. It's just additional paperwork for them. For us, there is some ability to make sure that everyone and parents is on the same page, which I think was the discussion at the prior meeting. So if that's the main goal, to make sure that the parents are looped into the discussion, there is a portion where the parents would need to sign. So then, yes, that would be probably a better way to go. I would probably opt out of the TB test and live scan portion, because we would typically use that for individuals that are working in a youth program or a senior program, because those are kind of universal requirements, whereas in this capacity, they aren't necessarily directly interacting with the public or in a way that could be hazardous or anything like that. So,
Right, and it would only apply to those 18 or 19 as well. I think that all makes sense to me, and I do think that the fact that the volunteer paperwork includes a sign-off from the parents is important. So, yeah,
okay,
I like it.
great.
I just wonder at what point in the process do we ask them to do paperwork for the purpose of not deterring them, right? So if they get to the point of interviewing and then we introduce paperwork, are they already like bought in and therefore it's just like do a little paperwork? Or should we have them do that ahead of interviewing and then maybe less people are inclined? Because even if it's 20 pages and they only have to fill out one, you know, are we deterring kids by doing it?
If you want my honest opinion, I would wait till the very end,
Okay.
and then I'll meet with them, or staff will meet with them, and do that after they've been selected.
Yeah.
Even trying to get a 17-year-old to apply for a job that they get paid for,
Yeah.
if you make it too hard. In our prior system that we used, that wasn't like your typical NeoGov and all of those. You would have thought it was the hardest process for them to apply to get paid to do something. But with NeoGov, that makes it so simple. So I think that definitely showed us that the simpler
Great.
the process, the
Yeah,
more
so to the
responsible.
end. That makes sense. Yeah.
Any other questions about the ambassadors program to the commission? Okay. Any other comments about the work plan at all?
Sorry, if I could just bounce right back to that.
Sure.
So just to confirm, it is a 6-month commitment is where the commission landed at the last meeting. Just to make sure I was understanding the recording correctly.
I think so, yeah, I think so.
And then I will remove the transportation. I was looking for that in the section and I just found it, so.
Nice.
That section.
And
But
then-
otherwise,
In terms of like the number of days that they're committing, are they committing to more than just coming to meetings? Or are they, like, in their mind, are they signing up for six nights of volunteering? Is it also like some at the events themselves? Kind of curious to hear, beyond the 6 months, like what of the 6 months are they committing to?
yeah, so the program expectation would be that they are required to attend all of the meetings.
Right.
There is participate in trainings and community events, but that's fairly vague.
Mm.
Historically, it's been kind of what they're available to do. Now, if the commission wanted to put must attend one event in the 6 months, we can certainly add that in. It would be up to the commission.
No, I guess it was just more out of curiosity. I don't think I was looking to add any more requirements personally.
And then we'll send out an email for the September meeting to schedule an interview time block.
So Adrian, do we have any public comments on this action item?
We do not.
Okay. The time for public comment on this item is now closed. Moving on to commission reports. Each commissioner may address the Community Services Commission and public on matters of general information and/or concern. This is also the time for commissioners to report on conferences and/or meetings they have attended since our last commission meeting. So starting with Commissioner Shi, who is absent today. Moving on to Commissioner Lotz.
This is not the forum to talk about playground safety, correct?
It is related to what we do in the city, so that's not a problem.
It's originally Parks and Recs, this
Yep.
commission, and then they included the Mission Playhouse plus
Okay.
SGV Ride Plus and everything else.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it is a part of the purview.
Mhm.
Because I think, I mean, this is my line of work, so it's obvious to me when I find these types of things. But I think the easiest thing to keep up with is the amount of wood chips in a playground. I notice that very often that it gets down to the dirt, which means you're left with 0 fall height. Basically, if you were to fall off of a playground, you could sustain critical injury. So I just recommend like monthly check-ins on playgrounds that have wood chips. And then I could go down a rabbit hole, but I think I'll stop there because that's just just an easy way for recreation staff or public works staff to address, like, do we need to just basically top off wood chips, or sometimes it's just moving them around the playground because they've been displaced.
Right.
So it can be that simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a playground in particular that you've identified that needs more immediate attention?
Smith Park is my closest one, and I do think it does need attention. I mean, the sand playground there is 1,000% out of compliance, so I think that's a bigger issue.
Sure.
But the wood chips at Smith Park, yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I was also curious because I understand we do open the public schools on the weekends for folks to play at too, right?
Correct.
So I was just curious what the city's take was on, the safety of those facilities, being that they do become open to the public, and how you share that responsibility too, because you would think that most of it falls on the school district, but then all of a sudden you're opening it up to the public, outside on the weekends too. So
Yes.
just curious that thought.
So we offer the school parks at Washington and Coolidge. The public is expected and asked to stay to like the grassy area or the recreational area rather than kind of wandering through the rest of the campus.
Sure.
There's no fence that delineates it. And the city staff maintain trash and make sure that it's picked up at the end of each of the open hours. and then open and closes. Same with the tennis courts over at Washington. The actual maintenance of the school site, such as like mowing lawns and maintaining the equipment, is done by SGUSD.
Right.
So that is that kind of area where things overlap. But if there's things that we see that potentially are a safety hazard, then we would bring that to SGUSD because they have similar standards, obviously, as we do,
Right.
given the people that they're serving at their campus.
Right.
There are certain projects where there may be items where the cities can, or the city and the school district can work together to provide a higher level of service and safety. For example, the tennis courts, technically owned by the district, but the city just paid to have them resurfaced and restriped.
Nice.
So people aren't slipping on the courts, and you
Mhm.
can actually see where the lines are and all of that good stuff. So there are certain changes like that that will continue to happen, but as a whole, to actually answer your question, it is operated by the school district.
Which makes sense, and that's what I was figuring, but it's great to know that it is still kept into consideration, and you think, like, if this is not safe, we'll close it to the general public, even if the school district makes their own decision, right? So. Nice. That's all the comment I have.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I think if this is something that you think needs to be addressed as a commission, then, I guess the idea is to reach out to the staff in advance and maybe put an agenda item on the agenda, so we can have a fuller discussion if there's something in particular.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. Moving on to Commissioner Rodriguez.
In line with what Commissioner Lotz was saying, only because I spent time last week at the Washington school. We were playing in there, but I noticed that it said specifically no pets. It looked like it was a dog park. So I'm not sure if there was just any restriction, or because usually dog parks would have a fence, and you know how dogs can be when a kid suddenly comes running.
Right.
So, and I'm not sure if that's just allowed. It's just something that I noticed.
Yeah, so it's an ongoing concern that both the district and the city have been trying to work through. It will end up requiring, if to have no dogs at the school parks would require a change in the city's municipal code to encompass the school parks. Because the way that the city's municipal code reads is that there's dogs must be on a leash in city parks. So right now that extends to the kind of open space at Coolidge and Washington. So that's all that SGPD can enforce is the leash rule. So you'll see signs that are going up that are bright yellow. They should be up this week. That have a dog on a leash and has our municipal code on it. So in that way, the staff and the general public can point to that sign. So hopefully that will reduce the amount of droppings from the animals that are left behind from owners that are not picking up after them, and then the number of dogs that are wandering without a leash. But to reduce the number of dogs that are there that are on a leash, we'll again take that second step to have happen.
So does that sign go over the no dogs in the?
So it won't go over the no dog sign because that's still an SGUSD policy that they can enforce, to have no dogs during their like regular business hours, and if they were running it themselves during the after school time, then they could certainly enforce the no pets or dogs during that time. But that's where that overlap becomes very murky and difficult for the police department to enforce when there's kind of somewhat conflicting policies or laws.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
No problem. But we are actively trying to resolve it.
Got it.
Are there any public safety concerns with regards to dogs in those spaces?
At
They're
the
unleashed.
very least, when I was there, it didn't seem like it was dangerous. But with these things, it only takes one. And usually, from what I understand, the reason why there are fences on dog parks, because even if they're on leash, they can just easily dart out. And if a kid is running, all of those kids are playing soccer and dodgeball and basketball. So some just go right after a child. And my 11-month-old was walking around too. I wasn't worried, but if someone was more or less negligent, or just more like negligent than me, could have had their child going off somewhere. So with the pets. So just saying that it's. I just had that question because I saw it was no pets and it was there, and at the very least, at that specific moment, there wasn't any safety concern. But I just wanted to make sure that people are abiding by specific rules because of things can happen, and I don't know if those signs were put up because there has been incidents prior.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, but
Point. So in regards to the conferences or meetings that I have attended, so I did go out to the movie night, Victor Lugo. I saw Matthew there and the staff with the wonderful popcorn. I don't have any hard numbers, but my sense is that attendance was lower than in previous years. So what does attendance look like so far for Summer in the Park? Summer in the Parks programs.
so that was the first concert and movie that we've hosted. Typically, we average between. Our good nights are typically between 500 to 800, depending on who's performing. So it's not huge in comparison to other cities that are offering that type of service. Our Mission Playhouse concerts will typically bring in a different crowd. I don't have those numbers readily available, though. Typically, we've tried country a few times, and that's typically where we see our lowest attendance. So I'm hoping between our kids' concert and then the final concert that we will have a much higher turnout. Typically when we have mariachi bands or like classic rock, those are the most well received in our community.
Okay. Do we see a trend towards lower attendance numbers in general? Because I'm thinking back to Cinco de Mayo too, which is one of my favorite events for the city. Just the backdrop is beautiful with the Mission. And I remember it being a little bit, maybe it was the weather, but I remember that the attendance was a little bit sparser than I remembered. Coming out of the pandemic, obviously it was a different time. People were so excited about just being outdoors. But do we see a trend lower in attendance? And is that something we should be concerned about in terms of communication strategy, making sure that the public's aware that we're putting all this effort into these programs and we want them to come out?
Right. I don't see a major trend downward. I think we are trying new things and spreading things out, and so that's changing the perception of the programs as well. So specifically to Cinco de Mayo, we definitely did things much different than we have in past years as far as layout is concerned. Same with Culture Fest. There were things kind of tucked away in little alcoves, so it made that attendance seem much smaller than it normally would have been because everything's more congested onto the street. But as far as I know, our attendance hasn't been drastically declining other than the two events that you've mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But otherwise, I thought it was a good event. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay for the movie, but I think it's wonderful that I saw lots of members of the community come out with their lawn chairs and kids playing and dancing to the music. So that was really fun. Okay, so I think at this point we can move on to staff comments. I don't know, Matthew, if you have any updates on the programs that we've seen since the last commission meeting or anything else you want us to be aware of going forward?
Nothing at this time. At the October meeting, we'll provide a full debrief of summer as well.
Okay. Okay. So we are at the point where we will adjourn this meeting, and as we talked about, there should be a meeting on August 5th at 6:30. We're thinking about rescheduling that, or rather canceling this meeting, holding a special meeting in September to vet the candidates who are interested in joining the Ambassador Youth Program, which the staff will give us a couple of dates so that we can react to it and times. And so the next meeting will be held, do we have it? Monday, October 7th. Okay. At 6:30 p.m. So information regarding matters to be considered at each meeting will be available on the Friday before the Community Services Commission meeting on the city's website at www.sangabrielcity.com. This regular meeting is now adjourned at 7:51 p.m.